The guy's watch probably cost more than her beat-up Honda Civic, and he made sure everyone noticed. Conrad Beaumont, new money loudmouth, stared at the menu like it was written in hieroglyphics. Then he aimed that watch right at Naomi, our invisible waitress. Bet she can't even read this thing. Ice bloomed in Naomi's veins. The silence in that restaurant, thick enough to choke on. What they didn't know, what Beaumont couldn't know as he sneered, was that Naomi wasn't just a server. Not even close. Years of sacrifice, a PhD left unfinished. It all coiled tight inside her. They think they're about to watch her break. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. The guy's watch probably cost more than her beat-up Honda Civic, and he made sure everyone noticed. Conrad Beaumont, new money, loudmouth, stared at the menu like it was written in hieroglyphics. Then he aimed that watch right at Naomi, our invisible waitress. Bet she can't even read this thing. Ice bloomed in Naomi's veins. The silence in that restaurant, thick enough to choke on. What they didn't know, what Beaumont couldn't know as he sneered, was that Naomi wasn't just a server, not even close. Years of sacrifice, a PhD left unfinished. It all coiled tight inside her. They think they're about to watch her break. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. Lille wasn't just a restaurant. It was a carefully constructed illusion. The air itself felt rarefied, scrubbed clean of the city's grit, and infused with the faint, intoxicating scent of truffles and generational wealth. Situated on the Upper East Side, it served as a gilded cage for those who understood that dining was performance art. Austrian crystal chandeliers cast a flattering glow, smoothing out wrinkles and softening the edges of ruthless deals. Silence was prized, a hushed symphony punctuated by the delicate clink of Christopher silverware on Bernardin porcelain, the hushed whispers of the city's power brokers plotting their next move. Naomi navigated this world with the practiced grace of a seasoned diplomat, though at 27 she felt every one of her years. The severe black uniform, a bespoke suit that felt more like armor than attire, concealed the bone-deep weariness that had become her constant companion. To the restaurant's patrons, she was simply a pair of hands, a polite smile, a silent facilitator. They remained blind to the intellect simmering beneath the surface, to the scholar who had once lost herself in the labyrinthine verses of 17th century French poetry, who had debated the finer points of post-structuralism until dawn in the hallowed halls of academia. They certainly knew nothing of the crushing weight of her mother's medical bills, a financial abyss so vast it had swallowed her PhD candidacy whole, leaving her with a silver tray and a flawlessly rehearsed customer service smile. Her mother, a history teacher whose tiny New Jersey apartment had overflowed with books and a boundless love for the world, now lay trapped within the sterile confines of a hospital room, fighting a battle Naomi could only fund, not fight alongside. So she served. She served the hedge fund managers who nonchalantly discussed laying off hundreds over a $400 bottle of Chateau Margaux. She served the society wives who delicately picked at their $80 salads while bemoaning the hardships of renovating their Hamptons estates. She served, she listened, and with each deferential nod, a piece of her soul withered. But tonight felt different. A palpable wave of arrogance emanated from a corner booth centered on Conrad Beaumont. He was a nouveau riche storm, a real estate magnate who had bulldozed his way into the city's upper echelon with a portfolio of sterile skyscrapers and a personality to match. Loud where others were discreet, flashy where others valued understatement, he sported a watch that likely cost more than Naomi's student debt, brandishing it as if to constantly remind everyone of its worth. He was accompanied by his entourage, Brittany, his third wife, barely older than Naomi, her face a testament to the wonders of cosmetic surgery, and Leland Pryor, a junior partner at Beaumont's firm, whose spine appeared to have been surgically removed to enhance his sycophancy. He laughed a nanosecond too early at Beaumont's jokes, nodding with exaggerated fervor at his every utterance. Naomi's colleague, George, a veteran waiter with weary eyes, had given her a knowing look as he assigned her the table. "Good luck," he'd muttered. "2 bottles of Bordeaux, 0 tip, and a world-class sadist. The performance began the moment Naomi approached. "Wine list," Beaumont barked, not bothering to make eye contact, snapping his fingers with insulting casualness. Naomi presented the leather-bound tome, her voice calm. "Of course, sir." He ran his finger down the list, his lips moving slightly as he butchered the French names. Get me the Patras, the 05. His pronunciation was a mangled mess, the S hissing like a viper into the hushed atmosphere. Naomi's training kicked in. Her face remained a mask of placid professionalism. "An excellent choice, sir. The 2005 Petrus is a remarkable vintage." She delivered the name with perfect pronunciation. Petrus, the T silent, the vowels pure. It was a subtle correction, barely perceptible, but Beaumont's eyes narrowed. He had noticed. It was a pinprick to his carefully constructed facade of sophistication. The meal unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. Beaumont complained that his steak, ordered rare, was too bloody. He sent back a side dish, claiming the asparagus was limp. Each complaint was delivered with theatrical sighs, a public declaration of his refined palate. Leland chimed in with predictable obsequiousness. "Conrad, your standards are simply higher." Brittany remained glued to her phone, occasionally glancing up to pout for a selfie. Naomi handled each complaint with robotic efficiency. "I will have the chef prepare another immediately, sir." "My apologies, sir." "I will replace it at once." Her unwavering composure seemed to infuriate him further. He was a predator who thrived on the panic of his prey, and she was denying him the satisfaction. Then came the moment for the main course selection. The tension at the table crackled. Beaumont had been building toward this, preparing to assert his dominance, to put the quiet, efficient waitress in her place. He scanned the menu, his finger landing on one of the most complex and traditionally prepared items, a dish rarely ordered by the restaurant's American clientele. "I'll have the—" he began, his voice booming across the hushed dining room. He stumbled over the name, butchering the French with gusto. "The Ron Devo au Déjair." He massacred it. "Rognon Devo au Dijon." Leland chuckled, a wet, unpleasant sound. "Only you, Conrad, always picking the most exotic thing." Beaumont leaned back, a smug grin plastered on his face. He fixed his gaze on Naomi, then gestured dismissively at the menu. His voice dripped with condescending poison, loud enough for heads to turn. "You know what? I don't even know if she can help me. I doubt she can even read the menu." The words hung in the air, brutal and sharp. Silverware clattered to a halt. Whispers died. Every eye in the gilded cage was riveted on the black-clad waitress and the billionaire who had just publicly stripped her of her competence, her intelligence, her very humanity. Brittany looked up from her phone, a flicker of genuine interest in her eyes. Leland's grin stretched wider, his eagerness repulsive. Naomi felt a hot flush crawl up her neck. Her training, her composure, the wall she had painstakingly built around herself, began to tremble. In his eyes, she was not a person, but a prop, an object to be belittled for sport. All the slights, all the condescension, all the sacrifices she had made, the scholarly pursuits traded for aching feet, the academic journals for greasy aprons, coalesced into a searing point of anger. She stood perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back, steady. She took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the curated air of Lille fill her lungs. Then she broke character. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She met Conrad Beaumont's gaze, and the scholar she had locked away stepped forward. Her voice, when it came, was not the clipped, polite tone of a waitress. It was fluid, melodic, resonant. The French that flowed from her lips was not the textbook French of a high school classroom, but the flawless, Parisian-accented French of someone who had lived and breathed the language, who had loved its poetry and dissected its history. "Pardon, Monsieur Beaumont," she began, her tone soft but edged with steel. The shift was so sudden, so absolute, that Beaumont's smirk faltered. "Allow me to elaborate on rognon de veau à la Dijonnaise." "Forgive me, Mr. Beaumont, but the veal kidneys in a Dijon-style sauce are not simply a dish, it is a poem from Burgundy." She didn't stop. She didn't give him a moment to recover. Tradition demands that the kidneys are sautéed on high heat in clarified butter, just enough to sear the outside while keeping the center pink and tender. The sauce Dijonnaise, is not simply mustard. It is a delicate balance of moutarde de Dijon à l'ancienne, the kind with whole mustard seeds, deglazed with a regional white wine, typically an aligoté, then enriched with crème fraîche and a touch of fresh, chopped parsley. The dining room was utterly silent. A chef peering from the kitchen doorway stood frozen. Mr. Dubois, the restaurant's stern French-born manager, had stopped mid-stride, his face a mask of astonishment. Naomi held Beaumont's gaze, her eyes unwavering. She was no longer a waitress. She was a lecturer, and he was her sole, inadequate student. Furthermore, she continued, her voice gaining a quiet confidence, the choice of mustard is crucial. A mustard that is too aggressive would overwhelm the delicate flavor of the veal. It is a dish that speaks of the terroir of the land of Burgundy itself. It is rustic, yet it demands execution of absolute finesse. Perhaps you would prefer that I ask the chef to ensure the balance is perfect for you, sir, or perhaps something less nuanced? She finished, the final French syllable hanging in the air. The silence stretched, profound. Conrad Beaumont, the titan of industry, sat speechless, his face drained of color. He looked smaller, deflated in his expensive suit. Leland Pryor's sycophantic grin had vanished, replaced by horrified disbelief. Naomi had done more than just read the menu. She had recited its soul, exposing him not as a connoisseur but as a fraud. She had held up a mirror, and for the first time in a long time, Conrad Beaumont had been forced to see his own reflection. The silence was a vacuum, sucking the air and arrogance out of the room. Every diner was a statue in a tableau of shock. Beaumont's mouth hung slightly open, his eyes wide with fury and humiliation. He had tried to swat a fly and disturbed a hornet's nest of linguistic and culinary expertise. Brittany was the first to move, slowly lowering her phone, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised. For the first time, she looked at her husband with something other than boredom. She had just witnessed his public dismantling, not by a business rival, but by a waitress. The power dynamic she had married into had flickered. Leland Pryor, ever the weather vane, darted his gaze between Beaumont and Naomi, his face a mess of confusion. The master he served had been wounded, and his sycophantic instincts were short-circuiting. Naomi stood her ground, her heart hammering against her ribs. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a wave of fear. What have I done? She had made the customer feel small, a billionaire with a fragile ego and a vindictive streak. Her job, her mother's care, was on fire. Finally, Beaumont found his voice, a guttural growl, devoid of bombast. "Get me your manager," he rasped, his eyes never leaving Naomi's. Before Naomi could respond, Mr. Dubois glided to the table. "Is there a problem, Mr. Beaumont?" Dubois asked, his voice smooth as velvet, but with a core of granite. His eyes flickered towards Naomi, unreadable. Beaumont pointed a trembling finger. This girl has a problem with authority. I want her gone. I spend thousands and I will not be lectured by the help." Dubois' face remained impassive. "Mademoiselle Parker, please go to my office. I will join you shortly. George, take over for Mr. Beaumont's table." Naomi gave a tight nod, unable to look at Beaumont. She turned and walked away, each step feeling like a step towards the gallows. The walk took her past a small table near the window. A woman dining alone, elegant and sharp-featured, gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Naomi, terrified, barely registered it. In his office, Naomi sat on a stiff chair, her hands twisting. The minutes stretched into an eternity. She thought of her mother, the bills, the pride curdling into panic. When Dubois finally entered, he closed the door with a soft click. "Explain yourself, Parker," he said, his French accent thickening. Naomi swallowed. "Mr. Beaumont was demeaning. He said I couldn't read. I just reacted." "You eviscerated him," Dubois countered. "You used your knowledge as a weapon, in my restaurant." "It was the truth," Naomi whispered. Dubois let out a humorless laugh. "The truth is that Conrad Beaumont's company holds the lease on this building. The truth is that he brings clients who spend more in one night than you make in 3 months. That is the truth that matters. Naomi's heart sank. Power and money would always win. He is demanding that I fire you, Dubois continued. So you're going to fire me? Naomi said flatly. Dubois stopped pacing, his expression shifting. Weariness, respect. What you did out there was the single most unprofessional, insubordinate, and reckless act I have ever witnessed. It was also magnificent. I have not heard French like that since my grandmother's kitchen in Lyon. He continued, a faint smile touching his lips. You didn't just describe the dish. You understood it. Where did you learn to speak like that? I was working on my doctorate, Naomi admitted quietly. French literature before I had to stop. Dubois nodded slowly. Mr. Beaumont has put me in an impossible position. I cannot afford to make an enemy of him, but I will not be bullied into firing my best staff member either, especially one who has more class in her little finger than he has in his entire bank account. Relief washed over Naomi. However, Dubois continued, I cannot ignore this. It was a disruption. You are a liability right now. I'm putting you on paid administrative leave for 2 weeks. Go home. Stay quiet. Let this blow over. I will handle Beaumont. I will tell him you have been severely disciplined. We will hope his ego is satisfied. It wasn't a firing, but it felt like a punishment. Thank you, Mr. Dubois, she managed to say. Don't thank me yet, he warned. Men like Beaumont do not forget. This may not be over. Go. Use the back exit. As Naomi slipped out into the cool night air, the city's noise rushed back in. She had won the battle of words, but she was afraid she was about to lose the war. Meanwhile, back in the dining room, the woman who had nodded at Naomi was settling her bill. Her name was Genevieve Laurent, a respected food journalist known for her narrative articles. She had seen a story about dignity, hidden talent, and power imbalances. She paid her bill in cash, and as she walked out, she wasn't thinking about her meal. She was thinking about her opening sentence. Conrad Beaumont had wanted to make a stink. Genevieve Laurent was about to create a storm. The 2 weeks of paid leave were a special kind of torment. The silence of her apartment was a stark contrast to the restaurant's cacophony. Every phone call made her jump. Every email notification carried the potential for disaster. She spent the days caring for her mother, whose condition remained fragile. The hospital trips were a grim reminder of why she needed her job. Her mother would ask about work, and Naomi would lie, hiding the drama. The lie tasted like ash. She had defended her dignity, but she felt more powerless than ever. Meanwhile, Genevieve Laurent was writing, not in a sterile office, but in her sun-drenched apartment. She knew she had a delicate story. Naming Conrad Beaumont or Naomi would be risky, so she wrote around them. Her article, published a week into Naomi's suspension, was titled The Menu. It didn't appear in the food section. It was on the front page of Culture and Society. It began with a question. What is the true cost of a luxury meal? Genevieve set the scene, describing a temple of haute cuisine, the patrons, and the silent staff. Then she introduced her archetypes, the mogul, a man of new money and ancient insecurities, and the scholar, a waitress with a rich history. She recounted the entire scene, capturing the dialogue without quotation marks. The mogul's remark, I doubt she can even read the menu, was the climax, and then she described the scholar's response, explaining its devastating effectiveness. It was not a rebuttal, but a lesson in a language used as a weapon. It delivered a dissertation on culture, history, and terroir. It raised the conversation to a level he could not reach. In 3 minutes, she demonstrated the canyon between wealth and class, between possessing everything and understanding anything. She silenced him, rendering him irrelevant. The article ended with a reflection on the invisible lives of service workers. It asked readers to look beyond the uniform. It never named Liel, Naomi Parker, or Conrad Beaumont. It didn't have to. The story detonated online. Authors, journalists, service workers, and executives shared it. The comment sections were a wildfire of speculation. This has to be an NYC Upper East Side for sure. I know exactly who the mogul is. Within 48 hours, the menu was the most read article. Podcasts discussed it. The anonymity fueled the fire. For the elite, the details were too specific to ignore. The description of the mogul pointed in one direction. Conrad Beaumont was at his desk when his PR director forwarded him the link with the subject line, "Urgent, we need to discuss." Beaumont read it, then again. A vain throb fueled the fire, turning it into a citywide guessing game. For the elite of New York, the details were too specific to ignore. The description of the mogul, the flashy watch, the trophy wife, the sycophantic associate, the palant for bludgeoning his way through situations pointed in one very specific, very public direction. Conrad Beaumont was at his desk in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park when his PR director, a perpetually stressed woman named Cynthia, forwarded him the link with the subject line, "Urgent. We need to discuss." Beaumont read it, then he read it again. A vein throbbed in his temple. The blood drained from his face, leaving a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. It was him. Every humiliating detail was there, wrapped in elegant prose that only made the exposure more gling. The writer had turned his moment of power into a parable of his ownishness. "Who wrote this?" He roared at Cynthia over the intercom. Find out who talked to them. Was it the manager Dubois? Was it that little waitress? His paranoia spiraled. He was in the middle of negotiating a massive legacy death-defining deal to build a new cultural center. A deal that required the cooperation of the city's old money philanthropists and cultural gatekeepers. The very people who would read an article like this and see him as the boorish caricature he secretly feared he was. This story didn't just wound his ego, it threatened his empire. It made him look like a buffoon, a man without the subtlety and grace required to helm a project of cultural significance. His phone rang. It was a board member from one of the foundations he was courting. The man's tone was breezy, but the question was pointed. Conrad say, "Did you see that piece in Canvas magazine? The one about the restaurant wild story? Almost sounds like someone we know." Beaumont felt a cold sweat on his neck. The story wasn't just a story anymore. It was a narrative, and it was sticking to him. The tremors of the silence in that restaurant had become an earthquake, and the ground was cracking right under his feet. He had tried to crush one person's spirit, and in doing so, he had handed a weapon to the entire city to use against him. He slammed his fist on his desk. He had to fix this. He had to find the source. He had to regain control of the narrative. His obsession shifted from punishing Naomi to silencing the story itself. But it was already too late. The story didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to everyone. For Naomi, the world had shrunk to the four walls of her apartment and the sterile corridors of the hospital. She saw the article because her friend, another former grad student who now worked as a paralegal, sent it to her. The subject line was just a series of exclamation points. Naomi read it with a feeling of dizzying dissociation. It was her life, her humiliation, her moment of defiance, all laid bare for the world to see. Yet she was an anonymous ghost at the center of it. Genevieve Laurent had protected her identity, but in doing so had made her story public property. She read the comments, the praise for the scholar, the condemnation of the mogul. It was vindicating but also terrifying. She was no longer just Naomi Parker, out-of-work waitress. She was a symbol, a hashtag waiting to happen. She felt exposed as if a spotlight had found her, even in the shadows of her forced leave. Her toe suspension was nearly over when an email landed in her inbox. The sender's name made her breath catch in her throat. Dr. Philip Rowe. Dr. Rowe had been her PhD advisor, her mentor. He was a titan in the world of French historical studies, a man whose opinion she valued more than almost anyone's. She hadn't spoken to him in over a year, not since her shame-filled call to tell him she was withdrawing from the program. Opening the email felt like reopening a wound. Subject: a long shot. But is this you? Dear Naomi, I hope this message finds you well. I am writing on a bit of a strange whim. A rather extraordinary article has been making the rounds in academic circles. I've attached it here. It's titled The Menu. It tells the story of an unnamed waitress, a scholar of French, who found herself in a challenging situation. As I read it, a few details stood out. The description of her linguistic precision, her deep knowledge of Burgundian history and culture. It sounded remarkably familiar, It sounded like the student who wrote that brilliant seminar paper on the socioeconomic impact of the salt tax in 17th century Burgundy. It is perhaps a wild guess, but I had to ask, was that you, Naomi? Regardless of your answer, reading this piece made me think of you and the great promise you showed. It reminded me of what a loss it was for the department when you had to leave. Which brings me to my second more important point. An opportunity has arisen. The University of Lyon, in partnership with our own institution, has just announced the inaugural Méline Dubois Fellowship for Franco-American Historical Research. It's a fully funded 2-year research position based in Lyon. The fellow will have complete access to the municipal archives to study the region's cultural and economic history. Naomi, it has your name written all over it. The application deadline is technically last week. However, Méline was a dear friend of mine, and I am on the selection committee. If you are interested, if you are able to even consider it, I can make a call. We would need a formal application and a statement of purpose by the end of the week. I know life may have taken you down a different path, but talent like yours is rare. I truly hope you will consider it. Warmly, Philip. Naomi read the email 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. It was a lifeline, a ghost from her old life reaching out to pull her back from the abyss. Lyon Research, the very dream she had been forced to bury. For a moment, the fear and anxiety vanished, replaced by a dazzling, terrifying spark of hope. Could she really go back? The thought was so overwhelming, so beautiful, it felt dangerous. Meanwhile, Conrad Beaumont's world was contracting. The cultural center deal, his magnum opus, was stalling. A key benefactor, an old money matriarch who sat on the board of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, had called him for a chat. She had spoken about the importance of character and public perception for such a prominent project. She never mentioned the article, but the subtext was a sledgehammer. The narrative was poisoning him. His PR director, Cynthia, was in crisis mode. "Conrad, we can't kill the story," she said, pacing his office. "It's too big now. Trying to suppress it will only confirm it's about you. We have to change the narrative." "And how do we do that?" he snarled. "You have to get ahead of it. You have to be the bigger man, the magnanimous one," she explained, her voice urgent. "You find the waitress, you apologize publicly, and then you help her. You offer her a job, a scholarship, something that makes you look like a patron, not a bully. You turn your villain into your protégé." Beaumont recoiled. Apologize to her. Are you insane? The idea of humbling himself before the woman who had humiliated him was physically repulsive. "It's not about what you feel, Conrad. It's about optics." Cynthia shot back her professional desperation, overriding her fear of him. "Right now, you're the mogul, a rich jerk who bullies waitresses. If you do this, you become Conrad Beaumont, the tough but fair titan who recognized brilliance in an unexpected place and rewarded it. It's a redemption story. The media will eat it up. It saves the deal, and it saves your reputation." He hated it. He hated every single thing about it. It felt like a surrender. But as he looked out over the city, over the empire he had built, he knew she was right. His legacy was at stake. The means no longer mattered, only the ends. "Fine," he bit out. "Find her. Find the girl. Make a meeting. We'll play it your way." The hunt began. It wasn't hard. Beaumont's resources were vast. A few calls from his security chief to industry contacts, a discreet inquiry to a contact inside a restaurant payment processing company, and a cross-reference with employee records from upscale French restaurants on the Upper East Side. Within a day, they had a name: Naomi Parker, Queens, New York, currently on administrative leave from Lille. Just as Naomi was beginning to sketch out a statement of purpose for the fellowship in Lyon, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a message appeared. "Miss Parker, my name is Cynthia Lell. I am the Executive Vice President of Communications for Beaumont Enterprises. Mr. Conrad Beaumont has asked to meet with you to discuss a matter of mutual importance. He is prepared to make you a very generous offer. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." Naomi stared at her phone, the blood turning to ice in her veins. He had found her. The man who had tried to break her was now reaching out with a generous offer. It felt less like an olive branch and more like the first touch of a spider's web. She now stood at a crossroads she could never have imagined. In one hand, she held an email that offered her a path back to her authentic self, a path of intellectual pursuit and quiet dignity, paved with difficulty and uncertainty. In the other, she held a voicemail that offered a shortcut, a transactional solution from the very man who had caused her pain, a path paved with his money and his motives. The choice she made would define not just her future, but who she was. The voicemail from Beaumont Enterprises was a serpent coiling in the heart of Naomi's quiet queen's apartment. For 2 days she let it lie there, a toxic promise she was terrified to touch. The voice of Cynthia Lull, smooth and corporate, replayed in her mind a stark contrast to the warm, hopeful words of Dr. Rowe's email, which she had printed and kept on her nightstand like a holy text. The two messages represented two entirely different futures, two fundamentally different Naomis. One path was a superhighway paved in gold. She could almost feel the weight of Beaumont's money, a heavy blanket that could smother all her anxieties. She pictured her mother's medical debt vanishing with a single wire transfer. She imagined her mother in a private room with a window overlooking a garden, receiving the best care money could buy, without the constant gnawing fear of the next bill. The thought was a siren song, seductive and overwhelmingly powerful. All she had to do was attend a meeting. All she had to do was listen. The other path was a narrow, winding trail up a mountain she had been forced to abandon years ago. It promised not comfort, but challenge, not wealth, but fulfillment. The fellowship in Lyle was a return to her soul's true home, a life of dusty archives, intellectual rigor, and the quiet pursuit of knowledge. It offered no immediate solutions to her financial burdens. It was a promise of a different kind of richness, one that couldn't be spent, but could never be taken away. On the second night, she sat by her mother's hospital bed, holding her frail hand. Her mother, lucid in the evening, quiet, looked at her. "You seem troubled, my love, more than usual." Naomi forced a smile. "Just tired, Mom. Long, weak." Her mother squeezed her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Naomi, I didn't raise you to be just tired. I raised you to be brilliant. Whatever it is, don't you dare sell your brilliance short. It is the one thing in this world that is truly yours." The word struck Naomi with the force of a physical blow. Don't sell your brilliance short. That was exactly what Beaumont wanted to do. He didn't want to hire her brilliance. He wanted to purchase it, package it, and put it on display to burnish his own tarnished name. In that moment, the conflict within her resolved into a single hard point of clarity. She knew she had to go to the meeting, not to consider the offer, but to formally reject it, to face the man who had tried to humiliate her and show him unequivocally that she could not be bought. She owed him nothing, but she owed her mother and herself this final act of self-possession. The next morning, she prepared for the meeting, not as a candidate preparing for an interview, but as a sovereign nation preparing for a diplomatic negotiation. She chose her outfit with meticulous care. It was a uniform of a different sort, not the black suit of a waitress designed for invisibility, but a simple charcoal gray dress her mother had helped her pick out for her first academic conference. Over it, she wore her mother's old college blazer, its tweed fabric, a soft, tangible connection to a legacy of intellect and integrity. She looked not like a supplicant, but like a scholar. The journey into Manhattan was a journey between worlds. The rumbling democratic chaos of the 7 train, filled with the tired, hopeful faces of 100 different countries, gave way to the cold, imposing canyons of Midtown. Beaumont Tower was a shard of smoked glass and steel punching a hole in the sky. It wasn't built to be beautiful. It was built to be dominant. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate power. The air was chilled and silent, the floors of polished black marble reflecting the cold, distant light. A security guard with an earpiece watched her with impassive eyes as she approached the concierge. Announcing her name felt like a confession. Cynthia Lull met her by the elevator bank. She was flawlessly put together, her smile a masterpiece of professional warmth that didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Parker, thank you so much for coming. Mr. Beaumont is very much looking forward to speaking with you." The elevator ascended with unnerving speed and silence. a hermetically sealed capsule rising to the heavens of capital. Naomi's ears popped. Cynthia made small talk about the weather, her voice a placid surface on a deep and dangerous ocean. Naomi simply nodded, conserving her energy, focusing her mind. The boardroom was even more intimidating than she had imagined. It was a sterile expanse of glass and stone, dominated by the single, monstrously long table of polished obsidian. But the true power move was the view. 3 walls were floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a god's-eye panorama of the city. It was a view designed to communicate one thing: I own all of this. You are a speck. Conrad Beaumont was waiting at the far end of the table, a king on his throne. He stood as she entered, a performance of chivalry that felt rehearsed and hollow. Miss Parker, he began, his voice a smooth, calibrated baritone that echoed slightly in the vast room. Naomi, thank you for coming. Please sit. Naomi chose a chair several seats away from him, creating a deliberate buffer of space. She placed her bag on the floor and her hands on the cool, unforgiving surface of the table. She met his gaze and waited her silence, a refusal to be the first to blink. I'll get straight to the point, he said, leaning forward, the picture of a man who values his time. What happened at the restaurant was unfortunate, a misunderstanding. I have a gruff way about me. I expect the best, and sometimes my passion comes out sideways. Naomi listened, her expression unreadable. She recognized the classic non-apology instantly, a rhetorical device to absolve the speaker of all responsibility. It wasn't my fault. It's just my passion. Her internal resolve hardened like tempered steel. I was, however, he continued, pivoting smoothly, impressed, deeply impressed. Your command of the language, your depth of knowledge, it was remarkable. It showed me that you are a person of immense and frankly wasted talent. He gestured to Cynthia, who slid a sleek, leather-bound folder across the table. It stopped directly in front of Naomi. For a moment she just looked at it. The temptation was a physical thing, a low hum of electricity. I believe that talent should be rewarded, Beaumont declared, his voice swelling with magnanimity. I believe in lifting people up. That's why I've asked you here. I want to offer you a position at Beaumont Enterprises. We've created a new role. Cynthia chimed in, her voice bright. Director of Cultural Liaison. You would work with our philanthropic wing, advising on our partnerships with museums, orchestras, and of course, the new cultural center. Your knowledge of European history and culture would be invaluable. Against her better judgment, Naomi opened the folder. The first page was a letter of offer. Her eyes scanned past the jargon to the bottom line. The salary was printed in bold. It was a number so large it seemed fictional, more money than her mother had made in the last 5 years combined. A wave of dizziness washed over her. That number could solve everything. It could erase the past, secure the present, and cushion the future. It was a weapon designed to disarm her will. Beaumont saw her pause. He smiled, sensing victory. The salary would be, let's say, a significant improvement on your current situation. 6 figures, full benefits, a corporate apartment in one of my buildings. We would take care of everything. He leaned back, spreading his hands. All your troubles gone. Naomi closed the folder with a soft final click. She pushed it gently back to the center of the table. She lifted her eyes, and the doubt that had flickered within them was gone, replaced by a calm, unwavering light. Mr. Beaumont, she said, her voice even and clear. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, and I thank you for this document. Her formality was a shield, a wall he could not breach. But I must decline your offer. The air in the room shifted. Beaumont's smile twitched a barely perceptible crack in the facade. Cynthia froze, her professional poise faltering. This was not in the script. I think you misunderstand, Beaumont said, his tone losing its warmth, gaining a hard, patronizing edge. This is a life-changing opportunity. Oh, I understand it perfectly, Naomi replied, a newfound strength flowing into her. You have a public relations crisis, born from a viral story in which you are the villain. You need to change the narrative. So you create a position for the story's heroine. You offer me a generous salary to become a symbol in your redemption story. You would parade me out at galas and board meetings, the brilliant waitress you in your great wisdom discovered and elevated. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharp and analytical. This isn't a job offer, Mr. Beaumont. It's a transaction. The most sophisticated form of hush money I've ever encountered. You want to purchase my silence and my compliance, and you've put a very high price on it. But my integrity was not listed on the menu that night, and it is not for sale now. Beaumont's face, stripped of its benevolent mask, was now a thundercloud of rage. The pretense was over. That's a very cynical way to look at a generous offer, young lady, he snarled. A person in your position can't afford to be so proud. The words meant to wound had the opposite effect. They ignited the last of her fear into pure focused strength. A person in my position, Naomi countered, her voice ringing with conviction, can't afford not to be. My mother is sick. I have debts that keep me awake at night. Believe me, the money in that folder is not an abstract concept to me. It would be the easy path, but it would cost me the one thing I have left that is entirely my own. She rose from her chair, her movement fluid and certain. Standing, she was no longer a small figure at a vast table. She was his equal. You and I value different things, Mr. Beaumont. You value acquisitions, optics, control. You thought you could diminish me by mocking my job, and now you think you can possess me with a new one. But my work as a waitress does not define my worth, and your money cannot define my future. She took a step back from the table, a final physical declaration of her freedom. I came here today to tell you that I don't need your help. The talent you were so impressed by has already opened a door for me. A real one. An email from my old professor arrived 2 days ago. It seems my story, the anonymous version, reached him. He has nominated me for the inaugural Madeleine Dubois Research Fellowship. I've accepted. I'll be moving to Lyon, France to complete the academic work I was forced to abandon. She let the words settle in the silent, cavernous room. She saw the flicker of disbelief and fury in his eyes. She hadn't just rejected his offer. She had revealed it to be wholly unnecessary. She had a better one. So thank you for the offer, Mr. Beaumont, but I don't want to be your director of cultural liaison. I'd rather be myself. Without another word, she turned her back on him and walked toward the door. She didn't run. She didn't look back. She could feel his enraged stare on her, the silent, sputtering fury of a man who had been outmaneuvered, a man used to buying anything he wanted, who had just discovered something priceless. As the heavy glass door whispered shut behind her, sealing Conrad Beaumont in his sterile, opulent prison, Naomi Parker stepped into the elevator, descending from that cold peak of power. She felt not smaller, but larger, and when she walked out of the tower's imposing entrance and into the brilliant, chaotic afternoon sun of New York City, she took a deep breath. The air no longer felt thin. It tasted of exhaust fumes, hot pretzels, and boundless, beautiful possibility. She was still in debt. Her mother was still sick, but she was free. Naomi's story isn't just about a clever comeback in a fancy restaurant. It's a powerful reminder that our circumstances don't define our worth. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or skyscrapers, but in knowledge, resilience, and the courage to stand by your own integrity. Naomi walked away from a six-figure salary, not because she was foolish, but because she was wise enough to know the difference between a price tag and true value. She chose the difficult path of her own dreams over the easy comfort of a golden cage. Her story forces us to ask ourselves, what is our own dignity worth? If Naomi's journey from quiet desperation to triumphant self-possession moved you, please give this video a like to help her story reach more people. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true stories that uncover the extraordinary strength hidden in everyday life. Click that notification bell so you never miss a chapter. Thank you for listening.